The bridge of the Merchant League flagship Dominion's price hummed with the satisfied energy of 300 years of uncontested supremacy. High Commander Nikolai stood before the observation viewport, his chitinous form gleaming under the soft blue luminescence of the command deck, mandibles clicking in what passed for Krellick's amusement as he studied the primitive blue world rotating below. Earth. How quaint. Status report, Nikolai commanded, his translator rendering his clicking speech into flat, mechanical standard. Behind him, his tactical officers worked at stations designed for efficiency rather than comfort. The Krellicks had no need for ergonomics when profits motivated better than padding ever could. Fleet positioning complete, Commander, Sub-Merchant Vrakix announced, his secondary arms gesturing at the holographic display that painted the solar system in amber light. 600 warships, each one a masterwork of intimidation economics, formed a perfect blockade pattern around the two inhabited worlds. Earth and its red neighbor, Mars, the primitives called it, glowed like trapped insects in a web of Krellick's military might. The human defense fleet has retreated to high orbit around their homeworld. 47 vessels total. Scanning indicates merchant-grade shields and kinetic weapons. No energy weapons detected beyond basic laser communications. Nikolai's mandibles spread wider. 47 ships. The Krellicks had lost more vessels to navigation errors in a single quarter. These humans had achieved faster-than-light capability a mere 40 standard cycles ago. Infants stumbling into a cosmos that had been carved into economic territories long before their ancestors crawled from whatever primordial muck had spawned them. The audacity of these creatures, thinking they could negotiate as equals. They refuse our exploitation charter? Nikolai asked, though he already knew the answer. Refusal was common among lesser species. It was also temporary. Affirmative, Commander. Their diplomatic response was... Vrakix paused, consulting his data tablet. Colorful. Show me. The holographic display shifted, replacing the tactical overview with a recording. A human female appeared, her features compressed in that peculiar way mammalian faces arranged themselves. 2 eyes, flat nose, exposed skin stretched over fragile bone. She wore a simple, dark suit, utterly devoid of the wealth-displaying ornaments that marked status among civilized species. Ambassador Victoria Reeves, according to the file data scrolling beside her image. The Krellick's Merchant League presents humanity with an opportunity for prosperity. Nikolai's own recorded voice played back. Submit to our standard integration protocols. Transfer 80% of resource extraction rights. Accept Krellick's governance of all trade routes beyond your system. Permit our merchant stations on your primary worlds. This is generous, given your developmental status. Ambassador Reeves's face had remained neutral during the ultimatum, but now she leaned forward slightly, and Nikolai noticed something in her eyes that his tactical briefing hadn't mentioned. Not fear, not even anger. Something else, something that made his sensory antennae twitch with vague discomfort. Hi, Commander Nikolai, Reeves had said, her voice carrying none of the trembling deference he'd expected. Humanity declines your charter. We counter with our own proposal. Withdraw your fleet from our system within 72 hours, return to Krellick space, and we'll consider this a diplomatic misunderstanding. Refuse, and you'll discover something important about my species. Oh? Nikolai's recorded voice dripped with condescension. Please, enlighten this misunderstanding representative of what you believe we should know. Reeves had smiled then, not a fearful grimace, not a desperate bluff. A genuine smile that held something ancient and weathered in its curves. We've survived ice ages that lasted millennia, Commander. We've endured plagues that killed half our population. We fought world wars that reduced entire continents to ash and somehow built ourselves back stronger each time. And for the past 40 years, we've been watching, learning, preparing. You look at us and see primitives who stumbled into the stars yesterday. We look at you and see 3 centuries of patterns, weaknesses, and arrogance. She leaned back, that smile never wavering. Leave now. You'll discover what patience bought us. The recording ended. Silence filled the bridge for 3 heartbeats before Nikolai's laughter shattered it. A chittering, clicking sound that his subordinates quickly joined. The noise cascaded through the command deck, officers abandoning their stations to share in the moment's hilarity. They threaten us with patience, Nikolai managed between bouts of mirth. The species that achieved basic FTL 4 decades ago lectures the Merchant League about strategy. He turned to Vrekix. Broadcast this across all Krelix networks, entertainment channels. Let our citizens enjoy the delusion of primitives who mistake observation for power. At once, Commander. Vrekix's own mandibles quivered with amusement as he routed the recording to the communication arrays. Within minutes, it would be playing in merchant houses across 17 systems, a perfect example of lesser species hubris. Nikolai studied the tactical display again, his mirth fading to professional assessment. 47 ships. No significant weapons. A population of barely 12 billion spread across 2 worlds and scattered stations. The exploitation charter was generous. Most primitive species received far harsher terms. The Merchant Council had authorized up to 95% resource extraction if resistance proved significant. It wouldn't. It never did. Prepare a demonstration strike, Nikolai ordered. Target their lunar industrial complexes. Nothing that will cause mass casualties. We're not barbarians, but enough to show them the cost of refusing civilization's embrace. Perhaps watching their infrastructure burn will teach them the value of our protection. Commander, the human ships are moving, Tactical Officer Krenth announced, her sensory stalks rigid with attention. The display zoomed on Earth's orbital space. The 47 human vessels had broken formation, accelerating away from their defensive positions with surprising speed. Nikolai watched them scatter across 3-dimensional space like startled preyfish. Running already? He clicked dismissively. Track them. I want to know where these patient strategists think they can hide in their own system. Commander. Krenth's voice held a note of confusion. They're gone. Define gone. Vanished from all scanning frequencies. Heat signatures dropped to background radiation levels. Electromagnetic emissions ceased. It's as if they simply stopped existing. Nikolai moved to the tactical station, his many legs carrying him with swift grace. The display showed empty space where human ships had been seconds ago. No debris field suggesting destruction. No energy traces indicating FTL jumps. They couldn't have escaped the system that quickly. Just nothing. Stealth technology, he concluded, though his briefing had mentioned no such capabilities. Crude, probably. They're hiding behind planetary bodies or in asteroid fields. Deploy hunter-killer squadrons, find them. But even as he gave the orders, that vague discomfort from earlier intensified. Ambassador Reeves's smile lingered in his memory. We've been watching, learning, preparing. Nikolai pushed the thought away. 3 centuries of Merchant League dominance didn't crumble because primitives learned a few tricks. 12,000 kilometers below Dominion's price, in a reinforced bunker beneath Geneva's mountains, Commander Elena Torres stood before a display showing the same tactical information Nikolai studied, but annotated with 40 years of human intelligence gathering. Every Krelix ship bore a designation: hull composition, shield frequency, weapons capabilities, crew complement, and, most importantly, identified weaknesses. They're broadcasting Reeves's warning as entertainment, Lieutenant Morrison reported from the communication station. His young face, still bearing the smoothness of someone who'd never seen real combat, twisted with anger. Laughing at us. "Let them laugh," Torres said quietly. Her voice carried the weight of 30 years in Earth's unified military command, back when it had been 5 separate militaries before first contact forced humanity to grow up fast. The best predators never see the trap until it closes. She studied the display, watching Krellick's hunter-killer squadrons deploy in predictable search patterns. Predictable because humanity had spent 4 decades analyzing every military engagement the Merchant League had recorded. The Krellicks fought like merchants. Overwhelming force, minimal risk, maximum intimidation. They'd never faced an opponent who refused to be intimidated. "Status of the Ghost Fleet?" Torres asked. "All vessels running silent, ma'am," Morrison replied. "Stealth systems operating at 100%. The Krellicks are scanning right past us." Torres allowed herself a small smile. Stealth technology wasn't crude, despite what Nikolai probably assumed. It was bleeding edge, developed through backchannels with 3 non-League species who'd suffered under Krellick's exploitation and were happy to share certain technological insights. Humanity had spent 15 years perfecting the systems, testing them on every sensor type the Krellicks used, ensuring absolute invisibility. The galaxy thought humans were 40 years into space exploration. They were, technically. But humanity had detected faint alien signals decades before achieving FTL. Enough to know they weren't alone. The real intelligence gathering started when their first survey probes began intercepting unencrypted Krellick's merchant traffic. By the time the first human ship broke light speed, Earth's military planners had been building detailed strategic assessments of every major galactic power for 30 years. "Ma'am, Ambassador Reeves on secure channel," Morrison announced. Torres tapped her comm implant. "Reeves, your performance was outstanding." Nikolai took the bait perfectly. Ambassador Reeves's voice carried dry amusement. "Years of diplomatic training, and my greatest contribution is playing the defiant primitive. I feel so accomplished." "You gave them exactly what they expected. A weaker species making brave noises. They'll underestimate us until it's too late." Torres zoomed the display, focusing on the Krellick's flagship. "He's planning a demonstration strike. Luna, probably. Our industrial facilities are tempting targets." "Then we demonstrate back," Reeves said. "Show them what 40 years of patience bought us." Torres thought about the weapon platforms orbiting Earth and Luna, disguised as communication satellites, weather monitors, debris tracking stations. She thought about the shipyards hidden in asteroid fields and Kuiper Belt shadows, cranking out warships while the galaxy watched humanity build peaceful exploration vessels. She thought about the cyber warfare divisions that had been inside Krellick's networks for 20 years, mapping every system, every protocol, every exploitable weakness. The galaxy saw primitive Earth, struggling to understand interstellar politics. It didn't see the planet that had survived extinction events and emerged stronger. It didn't see the species that had weaponized everything from splitting atoms to editing genes, then turned that innovative violence toward more creative destruction. It didn't see humanity's greatest weapon, the ability to adapt, to wait, to prepare while appearing harmless. "Authorization code Omega-7, Torres said clearly. "All defense platforms to active status. Ghost Fleet to attack positions. Cyber warfare to stand by for network infiltration." She paused, feeling the weight of what came next. 40 years of preparation compressed into this moment. "When Nikolai moves on Luna, we respond with everything. Show the Krellick's what patience bought us." "Understood, Commander." Reeves out. Torres looked at her staff. Morrison, barely 25. Garcia, at Tactical, who'd lost family in the mining colonies the Krelliks wanted to exploit. Reynolds, at Weapons Control, whose grandfather had fought in the last war before unified Earth government. All of them volunteers, all of them ready. They think we're nothing, Torres said quietly. 47 ships against 600, primitives against a 3-century empire. She straightened, feeling steel slide into her spine. Positions, everyone. The Krelliks want to teach us our place in the galaxy. Time to educate them instead. Outside, invisible to Krellik sensors, 47 human ships maneuvered through the dark. But 47 was only what the Krelliks had counted. They hadn't seen the hundreds more hiding in the solar system's shadows. The first warning came exactly 4 minutes after Torres issued her authorization codes. High Commander Nikolai watched the tactical display with mild interest as his bombardment squadron approached Luna's far side. 12 heavy cruisers, each carrying enough kinetic ordnance to reduce the human moon's industrial sector to radioactive craters. A demonstration. Nothing more. The humans would see their precious factories vaporized, understand the futility of resistance, and accept the charter within hours. Then the Merchant League could begin proper resource extraction, while Nikolai returned to his primary estates on Krelliks Prime. This tedious posting, just another line in his already impressive service record. Bombardment range in 90 seconds, Commander, Tactical Officer Krenth reported. Her sensory stalks tracked multiple data streams simultaneously, a biological advantage that made Krelliks naturally superior tactical operators. Human vessels still scattered. No organized defense detected. There, the tactical display erupted with warning indicators. Nikolai's attention snapped to the hologram as hundreds of new contacts appeared around Luna's orbit. Not ships. Too small. Too numerous. His tactical processors identified them within seconds. Satellites, communications equipment, weather monitoring stations, debris tracking platforms, all standard infrastructure that the Krellik scouts had cataloged during their initial survey 4 cycles ago. Harmless civilian technology. Except now, every single one was powering up weapon systems. Impossible, Nikolai breathed, his mandibles frozen mid-click. Those are weather satellites. Our intelligence confirmed. The first railgun fired. It wasn't like the elegant energy weapons civilized species used. No colorful beams, no dramatic charge-up sequence. Just a tungsten rod 3 meters long accelerated to 0.2 light speed by electromagnetic coils. The projectile covered the distance between Luna and Nikolai's bombardment squadron in 1.3 seconds. Krellik shields, designed to deflect energy weapons and absorb explosive ordnance, encountered solid matter moving at relativistic velocity. The cruiser Prophet's margin ceased to exist. One moment it was a 300-meter warship worth 17 billion credits. The next, it was an expanding cloud of superheated plasma and fragmenting hull plates. The railgun slug punched through shields, armor, and structural integrity like they were decorative tissue, carrying so much kinetic energy that the ship didn't explode. It simply converted to vapor. "Evasive action!" Nikolai shrieked, but the bombardment squadron was already reacting. 11 remaining cruisers scattered, their pilots engaging emergency burns in every direction, abandoning formation discipline and pure survival instinct. The satellites fired again, and again, and again. Each weather station contained a railgun. Each communications platform held targeting systems that had spent 40 years analyzing Krellik shield frequencies and armor composition. Each debris tracker networked with hundreds of others, creating a firing solution grid that covered Luna's entire orbital space. The humans hadn't built a defensive network. They'd constructed a kill box disguised as civilian infrastructure. and Nikolai's squadron had flown directly into it. Tungsten rods hammered into Krelik's shields at impossible velocities. The shields held for microseconds before the sheer kinetic force overwhelmed them, punching through to the hull beneath. Market Dominator lost its entire starboard section. Dividend's Promise spun wildly as a railgun slug sheared through its reactor housing. Asset Seizure managed 3 seconds of evasive flight before 2 rods hit simultaneously, one through the command deck and one through engineering. Nikolai watched, his body frozen in shock as his bombardment squadron died. 4 minutes, 12 cruisers, 47 direct hits from weapons that shouldn't exist on satellites that were supposed to be harmless. The tactical display painted Luna's orbit in red threat markers, not 12 weapons, not even 100. 736 individual railgun platforms, each one tracking, calculating, ready to fire. Retreat, he finally managed to order. All ships fall back to defensive positions around Dominion's price. The surviving bombardment cruisers, 7 now, 5 having been reduced to debris, burned hard away from Luna. The railgun platforms didn't pursue. They simply tracked the fleeing Krelik ships with mechanical precision, demonstrating that if humanity wanted to destroy the rest of the squadron, they could. They were choosing to let them run. Nikolai's sensory antennae trembled. Mercy from primitives felt worse than continued attack. "Commander, we're receiving a transmission," Vrakix announced from the communications station. His voice had lost all traces of amusement from earlier. "Human origin. They're asking if we'd like to continue our demonstration strike." "On screen," Nikolai commanded, though his mandibles barely formed the words. Ambassador Reeves appeared in the holographic display. She sat in the same simple chair from her previous transmission, wearing the same dark suit. But now, there was something different in her expression. Not triumph, not anger, just patient certainty. Behind her, Nikolai could see what appeared to be a military command center, humans moving with practiced efficiency among banks of tactical displays. "Hi, Commander Nikolai," Reeves said, her tone conversational. "Your bombardment squadron approached Luna with hostile intent. We responded proportionally. 7 of your 12 ships survived because we chose to demonstrate restraint, not because we lacked the capability to destroy them all." She leaned forward slightly. "You're currently calculating whether this was a lucky shot or systematic capability. Let me save you the analysis time. Those weather satellites you scanned 4 years ago? We built them with dual purposes. While you were studying their civilian functions, we were perfecting the weapon systems hidden inside them." Nikolai felt something cold settle in his thorax. 4 years ago. The Krelik scouts had surveyed Sol System 4 standard cycles before his arrival, cataloging all human space infrastructure, which meant humanity had anticipated Merchant League contact and prepared accordingly. They'd built weapons platforms while pretending to build peaceful satellites, gambling that Krelik scanning would see exactly what Krelik's arrogance expected to see. Primitive technology from primitive species. "You were inside our survey protocols," Nikolai realized aloud. "You knew what we'd scan for, what we'd dismiss as harmless." Reeves's smile returned, that same ancient expression that had bothered him before. "We've been intercepting galactic communications for decades, Commander, since before we achieved FTL. Merchant traffic, military broadcasts, diplomatic exchanges. Your transmissions aren't exactly encrypted against primitive species, are they? The Krelik scout ships that mapped our system used standard League scanning frequencies and followed predictable survey patterns. We gave them exactly what their sensors expected to find." She paused. Would you like to know how many other civilian installations in our solar system contain military capabilities you haven't detected? The tactical display around Nikolai suddenly erupted with new contacts. Hundreds of them. Thousands. Every asteroid mining station, every merchant habitat, every communications relay from Mercury to Neptune, all of them showed active military signatures now, dropping whatever stealth or misdirection had concealed their true nature. The Sol system transformed from a primitive backwater into a fortress bristling with weapons. "This isn't possible," Vrakix whispered. "Our intelligence showed 47 military vessels. No significant defense infrastructure. No." "Your intelligence showed what we wanted you to see," Reeves interrupted, somehow hearing their private conversation. Nikolai's attention snapped back to her image. She gestured to something off-screen, and the display split to show a tactical overview of Krellick's fleet positions. "Your hunter-killer squadrons are searching for our missing 47 ships. Would you like to know where they are?" The tactical display highlighted empty space throughout the solar system, between Mars and Jupiter, in Saturn's rings, hiding in the comet fields of the Kuiper Belt. Infrared signatures bloomed as hundreds of human vessels dropped their stealth systems simultaneously. Not 47 ships, not 100, 432 warships, each one broadcasting military-grade power signatures that made Nikolai's sensor suite scream with threat warnings. "We've been building them for 20 years, Reeves continued, her voice carrying the patient explanation of a teacher with a slow student. "While your merchants sold us outdated FTL drives and basic shield generators, we adapted the technology, improved it, weaponized it. Every trade agreement, every technology exchange, every generous Merchant League deal gave us more information to work with. You thought you were exploiting primitives. We were conducting the most extensive intelligence-gathering operation in human history." Nikolai couldn't speak. His mandibles hung slack as the truth restructured everything he'd believed about this mission. The humans weren't primitives stumbling into galactic affairs. They were predators who'd been studying their prey for generations before making first contact. Every interaction, every survey, every diplomatic exchange had been humanity learning Krellick's weaknesses while carefully concealing their own strengths. "Commander, our cyber warfare division has a message for your vessels," Reeves said. Nikolai heard something new in her voice now, not quite threat, but the absolute certainty of someone holding superior position. "We've been inside your fleet network for approximately..." She glanced at something off-screen. 17 days now, since your ships entered our system. We know your communication protocols, your targeting systems, your shield rotation frequencies. We've mapped every exploit in your merchant-grade security systems." Vrakix made a choking sound. "Commander, I'm detecting unauthorized access attempts on our primary systems. They're already inside the network. Command protocols are being overridden." Nikolai watched in growing horror as his own tactical display began showing conflicting information. Navigation systems reported ghost positions. Targeting solutions drifted toward friendly vessels. Shield generators cycled through random frequencies, leaving gaps in coverage. Nothing catastrophic yet, just subtle demonstrations that humanity controlled his fleet's computer networks more thoroughly than he did. "We haven't caused any permanent damage," Reeves assured him. "This is simply proof of concept. The species you dismissed as primitive had 40 years to prepare for your arrival, Commander. We used every single day wisely." 432 warships emerged fully from hiding now, forming up into combat formations that demonstrated practiced coordination. Nikolai's tactical processors analyzed their movements and reported with cold certainty. These weren't hastily assembled defense forces. These were military vessels crewed by people who trained for this exact scenario. using tactics designed specifically to counter Krellick's doctrine. You planned this, Nikolai said, his voice barely a whisper. All of it. The defiant message, the apparent weakness. You wanted us to attack. We gave you a choice, Reeves corrected. Withdraw peacefully or discover what patience bought us. You chose poorly. She stood, and Nikolai noticed for the first time that she wore a military uniform beneath that simple, dark jacket. Not a civilian diplomat, an officer. High Commander, you have 47 ships destroyed or disabled. You've lost tactical control of your fleet networks. Your bombardment squadron is scattered and demoralized, and you're currently surrounded by 432 warships that were designed from the ground up to kill Krellick's vessels efficiently. Her expression hardened. I strongly suggest you reconsider your position. The transmission ended. Silence filled the bridge of Dominion's price. Nikolai stared at the tactical display, watching human warships maneuver into formations that boxed his fleet against Earth's gravity well. 600 Krellick's vessels still outnumbered the humans, but numbers suddenly felt meaningless. The Merchant League fleet was designed for intimidation and merchant protection. Large ships with impressive shields, but weapons meant to threaten civilians, not fight military forces. The human vessels showed smaller signatures, but higher power outputs, concentrated into platforms built for actual warfare. Options, Nikolai demanded. We could attempt a breakthrough, Krenth offered weakly. Push past their formations and escape the system. They control our navigation systems, Vrakix pointed out. They could force our ships to collide with each other during the attempt. Then we fight, Nikolai said, mandibles clicking with desperate determination. We have superior numbers. Commander, incoming transmission, Vrakix interrupted. It's the Merchant Council. Priority emergency channel. Nikolai's sensory antennae drooped. The Council. His superiors. The collective economic power that governed the Krellick's Merchant League. They'd been watching the entire engagement through the fleet's data feeds, observing his humiliation in real time. On screen, he said, dreading what came next. Senior Merchant Calthor appeared, his aged chitin dull with stress. Behind him, 3 other council members observed with expressions Nikolai had seen before, when merchants decided an investment had gone catastrophically bad and needed to be liquidated. High Commander Nikolai, Calthor said formally. The Council has reviewed your engagement with the human species. We are displeased. Displeased, the word that preceded career destruction in Merchant League politics. Council members, the intelligence was faulty, Nikolai began. The humans did exactly what any intelligent species would do when facing a superior force, Calthor interrupted. They prepared, they observed, they adapted. You, High Commander, did what arrogant commanders always do. You assumed primitive appearance meant primitive capability. The senior merchant's mandibles clicked with disgust. Do you understand what you've done? You've revealed Merchant League vulnerability to every species we've exploited for 3 centuries. You've shown that our fleets are penetrable, our networks are insecure, and our tactics are predictable. Every subject species is going to see footage of 47 destroyed Krellick ships and wonder if they too could resist. Nikolai felt his career evaporating. What are my orders? You will attempt to salvage this disaster, Calthor said coldly. The Council is dispatching reinforcements, 400 additional vessels from the 3rd Fleet. They will arrive in 6 standard days. Until then, you will maintain defensive positions and attempt to negotiate a face-saving withdrawal. Do not, and I cannot stress this enough, do not engage the humans again unless you have absolute certainty of victory. The senior merchant leaned closer to his own display. The Merchant League does not accept defeat from primitives, Nikolai. Find a way to win, or find a way to make your failure look less catastrophic. Those are your only options. The transmission ended. Nikolai stared at nothing, processing the impossible situation. Reinforcements in 6 days. His fleet crippled and compromised. The humans demonstrating capabilities that suggested 4 decades of preparation, while the Merchant League had spent 3 centuries growing complacent. The sheer strategic brilliance of humanity's approach left him hollow. They'd turned every Krellick's assumption into a weapon, every moment of observation into tactical advantage. "Commander," Vrakik said quietly. "Orders?" Nikolai looked at the tactical display again, really looked this time. Not at numbers or force ratios, but at what those displays represented. 432 human warships meant shipyards. Humanity had hidden for years. Railgun platforms on satellites meant weapons development the League never detected. Network infiltration meant cyber warfare capabilities that exceeded Krellick's commercial security. All of it pointed to a single, terrifying conclusion. Humanity hadn't stumbled into the galaxy as primitives. They'd been preparing for this confrontation since they first intercepted Krellick's transmissions decades ago, planning and building toward the inevitable moment when the Merchant League came to exploit them. Ambassador Reeves's words echoed in his memory. "We've been watching, learning, preparing." "Pull all vessels back to high orbit around Mars," Nikolai ordered, his voice empty of confidence. "Defensive formation. Maintain scanner sweeps but engage nothing without my direct authorization." He paused, mandibles twitching with a question he'd never expected to ask in his entire military career. "And send a message to the humans. Request formal negotiations." Vrakik stared at him. "Commander?" "We can't fight them," Nikolai admitted, the words tasting like career poison on his translator. "Not until reinforcements arrive. Not while they control our networks and we're inside their weapons range." He looked at his tactical officer. "The humans won this engagement before we ever entered their system. The best we can do is survive until we understand how they did it." As his orders rippled through the fleet, 600 Krellick's vessels began the humiliating retreat to Mars orbit. Behind them, 432 human warships held position, not pursuing, not attacking, just watching with the patient certainty of predators who knew their prey had nowhere to run. And in that moment, High Commander Nikolai finally understood. Humanity had used their 40 years to study the galaxy's apex predator and learn exactly how to become something worse. The retreat to Mars orbit took 14 hours, and every minute felt like tactical death for High Commander Nikolai. His fleet arranged itself in a defensive sphere around the red planet, scanners sweeping constantly for human vessels that might or might not be there. The uncertainty was its own weapon. Humanity had demonstrated they could hide ships, penetrate networks, and strike with precision the Merchant League hadn't seen in 3 centuries of conquest. What else could they do that Krellick scanners couldn't detect? "No contacts within engagement range," Vrakix reported, her voice carrying the same hollow uncertainty that permeated the entire command crew. "Human fleet maintaining position at Luna orbit. No pursuit." "They don't need to pursue," Nikolai said bitterly. "They've made their point." He'd sent the negotiation requests 8 hours ago. The humans had acknowledged receipt with a simple 2-word response. "We're listening." Nothing more. No demands, no threats, no indication of what they wanted or expected. Just patient observation, as if they had all the time in the universe while the Merchant League scrambled to salvage its reputation. The tactical display showed Mars hanging in the center of his defensive formation like a lifeline. The Krelliks had 3 mining colonies on the planet's surface, resource extraction facilities that represented significant League investment. Hostages, Nikolai realized with growing dread. The humans could strike those facilities whenever they chose, and his fleet would be forced to respond or look even more impotent than they already did. "Commander," the communications officer said, his mandibles clicking nervously. "We're receiving a transmission from human vessels, multiple sources broadcast on all frequencies." "Multiple?" Nikolai straightened. "Show me." The holographic display changed, splitting into dozens of separate feeds. Each one showed a different human warship, sleek vessels that bore no resemblance to the defensive platforms they'd called satellites. These were proper military craft, bristling with weapons ports and sensor arrays that looked remarkably advanced for a species supposedly 40 years into space travel. But what seized Nikolai's attention wasn't the ships themselves. It was the names painted on their hulls in bold human script, translated helpfully by his ship's linguistic database. UNS Defiance, UNS Remember Earth, UNS Never Again, UNS Patient Fury, UNS Long Memory. Every ship bore a name that spoke to endurance, to remembrance, to the concept of waiting for the right moment to strike. Whoever had designed humanity's military nomenclature understood psychological warfare at a level the Merchant League had never bothered to master. "Attention, Krelliks vessels," a human voice said across all channels simultaneously, speaking flawless merchant standard with only the slightest accent. "This is Admiral Catherine Morrison, commanding the United Nations Solar Defense Initiative. We acknowledge your request for negotiations. Terms are as follows. You will withdraw all vessels beyond Jupiter's orbit within 6 hours. You will surrender all network access codes and security protocols you've used to infiltrate galactic commerce systems. You will provide complete documentation of your resource extraction activities in contested territories. You will agree to immediate inspection of all Krelliks cargo operations within 50 light-years of Sol." Nikolai felt his respiratory spiracles constrict. These weren't negotiation terms. They were surrender demands dressed in diplomatic language. "In return," Morrison continued, her voice carrying the calm authority of someone who held every tactical advantage and knew it, "we will guarantee safe passage of your fleet and provide humanitarian assistance to your wounded. We will not pursue military action beyond our solar system at this time. We will establish formal diplomatic channels for future interactions on equal terms." She paused. "You have 1 hour to respond." Morrison out. The transmission ended, leaving Nikolai staring at dozens of human warships on his display. Equal terms. The primitives wanted equal terms with the Merchant League, as if they hadn't spent 3 centuries in the position to make such demands. "Arrogant," Vrakix breathed. "They act as if they've won." "They have," Nikolai admitted, each word cutting his professional pride to ribbons. "At least in this engagement. They've demonstrated technological parity with our capital ships, superior cyber warfare capabilities, and strategic patience we never anticipated. If we refuse these terms and fight, we'll lose more vessels." He activated his command channel to the Merchant Council. "And when the reinforcements arrive, they'll be jumping into a system humanity has had 6 days to prepare." The response from Senior Merchant Calthor came within minutes, faster than the speed of light should have allowed, which meant he'd been monitoring the situation in real time. "Under no circumstances will the Merchant League accept those terms. We do not surrender to primitives." "Then what are my orders?" Nikolai demanded, frustration overwhelming his usual military deference. "The humans have capabilities we didn't anticipate. They're not bluffing about their military strength. If we engage again before understanding what we're facing, we'll suffer the same losses as at Luna." Your orders are to maintain position and wait for reinforcements, Calthor said coldly. The Third Fleet will arrive in 5 days. 14 hours. Combined fleet strength of 1,032 vessels will be sufficient to suppress human aggression regardless of their hidden preparations. And if the humans attack before then? They won't. Calthor's mandibles clicked with certainty. Look at their demands, Nikolai. They want us to withdraw, to surrender intelligence, to accept inspections, but they're offering safe passage. They're trying to force diplomatic resolution because they know they can't sustain conflict with our full military capacity. This is their one moment of advantage, achieved through surprise and preparation, and they're trying to leverage it into political victory before we demonstrate the League's true strength. Nikolai wanted to believe that analysis. It fit Merchant League doctrine, aligned with 3 centuries of successful exploitation, explained away humanity's capabilities as temporary advantage rather than fundamental shift in galactic power balance. But something about Admiral Catherine Morrison's voice bothered him. Not arrogance or desperation, just calm certainty that spoke to deeper confidence than her words suggested. Maintain defensive positions, Calthor ordered. Do not respond to human demands. Let them sit in their victory and wonder why we're not concerned. When the Third Fleet arrives, we'll show these primitives what happens to species that challenge Merchant League authority. The transmission ended. Nikolai looked at his tactical display, at the human vessels maintaining perfect formation around Luna, and wondered what they'd learned in 40 years that the Merchant League had missed in 3 centuries. Sir, Vrakik said quietly, pointing to a secondary display. We're detecting unusual activity on Mars. Nikolai turned, focusing on the readings. The 3 Krelix mining colonies were showing signs of, he frowned, consulting the data, power fluctuations, communications blackouts, atmospheric disturbances that suggested kinetic strikes, he said, his voice flat with recognition. The humans are attacking our ground facilities. No missile launches detected, Vrakix protested. No energy signatures indicating orbital bombardment. How? The answer came as one of the mining facilities simply vanished from sensors, replaced by a debris field and expanding shockwave. Then, another facility went dark. Then, the third. All 3 Krelix colonies on Mars eliminated in less than 60 seconds, and Nikolai's fleet hadn't detected the weapons that killed them. Mass driver rounds, his weapons officer said, analyzing the destruction patterns with growing horror. Fired from extreme range, minimal energy signature accelerated to 17% light speed. They hit with the force of small nuclear weapons. He looked up at Nikolai. Sir, the humans have been firing those rounds for hours. We just couldn't detect projectiles that small traveling that fast until they hit their targets. Capability reveal number 2, Nikolai whispered. The humans hadn't just prepared cyber warfare and railgun platforms. They'd developed kinetic kill weapons that could strike anywhere in the solar system with minimal warning, turning simple mass into devastating force through velocity alone. Another lesson from human history they'd apparently taken to heart. Sometimes the oldest weapons, updated with modern technology, became the most effective. A new transmission came through from Admiral Catherine Morrison, her expression neutral on the holographic display. Hi, Commander Nikolai. We've eliminated your ground installations on Mars as demonstration of our long-range strike capabilities. No Krelix personnel were killed. We gave your colonists 4 hours warning to evacuate, and our surveillance confirmed they reached underground shelters before impact. This is your second demonstration of human military capability. You have 45 minutes remaining to accept our negotiation terms before we provide a third demonstration. She leaned forward slightly, and Nikolai saw something in her eyes that chilled his respiratory system. Not anger or hatred, but the patient determination of someone who'd planned this confrontation down to the minute and had contingencies for every response. I should mention, Morrison continued, that those mass driver rounds travel too fast for your point defense systems to intercept. We have 47 installations throughout the solar system, each capable of firing a dozen rounds per hour. That's over 500 kinetic strikes we can deliver before you could possibly reach and destroy our platforms. She smiled without humor. You're currently in defensive formation around a planet, High Commander. Massed formation means efficient targeting for weapons that can't miss and can't be stopped. Think carefully about your next decision. The transmission ended. Nikolai stared at the tactical display, at his 600 vessels clustered together in perfect targeting geometry for weapons traveling 17% of light speed. Morrison was right. By the time his sensors detected incoming rounds, they'd have perhaps 3 seconds before impact. Not nearly enough time to maneuver capital ships. She's bluffing, Vrakik said, but her voice carried no conviction. She has to be bluffing. 500 kinetic strikes would require resources and infrastructure that a species with 40 years of secret military preparation might have built while we thought they were primitives, Nikolai finished. He looked at his tactical officer, seeing his own doubt reflected in her eyes. Recall what Ambassador Reeves said. We've been watching, learning, preparing. What if they meant it literally? What if humanity spent 40 years building a military infrastructure designed specifically to counter Merchant League doctrine? The implications made his mandibles ache. The Merchant League operated on the assumption that military superiority came from numbers and economic dominance. More ships, better resources, overwhelming force applied to crush resistance before it could organize. But humans apparently operated on different assumptions. Deception, preparation, patience, and strike capability that bypassed conventional defense. Orders, sir, Vrakix asked. Nikolai made the decision that would end his career but might save his fleet. Send response to Admiral Catherine Morrison. We accept negotiation terms. All vessels will withdraw beyond Jupiter orbit within the specified time frame. We'll provide the requested intelligence and agree to inspections. Commander, Vrakix's mandibles flared with shock. The Council specifically ordered. The Council is not sitting inside a target formation being threatened with kinetic bombardment, Nikolai said quietly. I will not sacrifice 600 ships and 30,000 crew because Senior Merchant Kolthor refuses to acknowledge that humanity represents a genuine military threat. He activated his command channel, broadcasting to all Krelix vessels. All ships prepare for systematic withdrawal to Jupiter orbit. Maintain defensive spacing and scanner sweeps. Helm, lay in course sequence that keeps us out of human weapons range throughout transit. The Krelix fleet began its second retreat in 14 hours, this time all the way to the outer solar system. Nikolai watched the tactical display as Mars fell behind, as the human vessels maintained their positions, without pursuit, without taunting transmissions, without any indication that they saw this as victory. They simply watched, patient as they'd always been, confident in the advantage they'd built through decades of careful preparation. Sir, the communications officer said nervously, Senior Merchant Kolthor is demanding immediate communication. Tell him I'm managing tactical situation and will report when circumstances permit, Nikolai replied, which was military code for, I'm ignoring your order. It would cost him his command, probably his freedom, possibly his life depending on how vindictive the Council felt. But better personal disgrace than tactical annihilation. As his fleet retreated toward Jupiter, Nikolai studied the human warship names again, looking for insight into the species that had so thoroughly defeated Merchant League assumptions. Never again. Long memory. Patient fury. Every name spoke to species trauma, converted into strategic doctrine, to cultural memory that informed military preparation, to the concept that the best victory came not from immediate retaliation, but from waiting until you were absolutely certain you could win. The Merchant League had 3 centuries of military success built on overwhelming force and economic dominance. Humanity had 40 years of preparation built on studying their enemy and refusing to fight until they held every advantage. And now, with reinforcements arriving in 5 days, the question became, what else had humanity prepared that they hadn't yet revealed? The mass drivers and railgun platforms and cyber warfare were demonstration capabilities designed to force retreat and establish negotiating position. But species that planned 40 years in advance didn't show all their capabilities in the first engagement. They saved the worst surprises for when their enemy thought they understood the tactical situation. Nikolai's mandibles clicked with grim realization as Jupiter appeared on his long-range scanners. The Third Fleet would arrive thinking they understood what they faced. They'd analyze his reports, dismiss human capabilities as limited surprise advantages, and commit to overwhelming force doctrine that had worked for 300 years. And humanity would be waiting. The Third Fleet arrived exactly when predicted, materializing at the edge of the solar system with the overwhelming confidence that had served the Merchant League for 3 centuries. 900 warships fresh from pacifying the Drexian resistance, commanded by Fleet Marshal Tokaresh himself, the architect of 17 successful subjugation campaigns. His reputation preceded him. Ruthless, methodical, utterly without mercy for species that defied Merchant League authority. High Commander Nikolai received the Marshal's transmission with a sense of profound dread he couldn't entirely suppress. Tokaresh's image filled the screen, his ceremonial armor gleaming with the wealth extracted from subjugated worlds, his mandibles arranged in an expression of contemptuous authority. "High Commander," Tokaresh said, his voice carrying the weight of absolute certainty. "The Council has reviewed your reports and concluded that you suffered from tactical incompetence rather than genuine human capability. I am assuming command of all operations in this system. Your fleet will integrate with mine for a comprehensive assault on Earth itself. We will demonstrate what happens when primitives defy the Merchant League." Nikolai's mandibles clicked nervously. "Marshal, with respect, you didn't face what we faced. The humans have capabilities that—" "I read your reports," Tokaresh interrupted. "Stealth technology, cyber warfare, mass drivers. Impressive for primitives, certainly, but nothing that overwhelming numerical superiority cannot overcome. The Council's error was sending a merchant's force to do a warrior's work. I bring 900 warships specifically designed for planetary assault. If humanity wishes to hide behind their kinetic weapons, we will simply absorb their limited strike capacity and proceed with orbital bombardment until they surrender unconditionally." "They have hundreds of hidden ships," Nikolai insisted. "Advanced warships we never detected during—" "Then we will destroy those ships," Tokaresh said flatly. "My fleet carries enough firepower to sterilize a planet, High Commander. Whatever surprises humanity prepared, they cannot match the accumulated military might of the Merchant League's primary battle fleet. You are dismissed from command. Report to my flagship for disciplinary review." The transmission ended. Nikolai sat in his command chair, feeling the weight of failure and something deeper, the certainty that Tokaresh was leading them all into disaster. The Marshal represented everything wrong with Merchant League doctrine, The assumption that overwhelming force could solve any problem, that military power existed on a simple numerical scale, that patience and preparation were irrelevant against superior resources. But humanity had spent 40 years proving that assumption wrong. 3 hours later, Tokresh's combined fleet of 1,500 warships, 900 fresh vessels, plus Nikolai's remaining forces, began their advance toward Earth. The Marshal employed the doctrine that had conquered 17 species: overwhelming presence, constant scanner sweeps, weapons hot and ready, no stealth, no deception, no subtlety. Just raw, crushing power, moving inexorably toward its target. Admiral Catherine Morrison watched the approaching fleet from the bridge of Never Again, her expression calm, despite the odds. 1,500 warships represented more firepower than any human military commander had faced in history. By pure metrics of tonnage, weapons capacity, and crew numbers, the Krelliks held a 5-to-1 advantage, even counting humanity's hidden fleets. "Mass driver platforms ready?" she asked her weapons officer. "All 47 online, Admiral. We can deliver sustained bombardment for 6 hours before depleting ammunition reserves." "Cyber warfare teams?" "We've maintained our back doors in their systems. Marshal Tokresh's fleet uses the same merchant-grade security protocols as High Commander Nikolai's forces. We can execute network disruption on your command." "Stealth fleet status?" "All 432 vessels deployed in ambush positions throughout the inner solar system. The Krelliks formation is proceeding exactly as predicted. Tight defensive clustering, maximum overlapping fire coverage, standard siege approach. They have no idea. We're waiting." Morrison nodded slowly, feeling the weight of what came next. Everything humanity had built for 40 years, every sacrifice, every secret, every carefully prepared advantage would be tested in the next few hours. Win, and humanity proved they belonged among the stars. Lose, and Earth itself faced subjugation. "Implement protocol decisive," she said quietly. The battle began, not with a dramatic first shot, but with a cascading systems failure across Tokresh's forward elements. 200 Krelliks warships simultaneously lost navigation, communications, and fire control as human cyber warfare teams activated backdoors that had existed in Merchant League systems for decades. Ships that moments ago had been advancing in perfect formation suddenly drifted blind, their crews frantically attempting to restore basic functionality. Then, the mass drivers fired. Kinetic rounds traveling at 17% of light speed struck with physics that no shields could deflect. The first salvo caught 37 Krellik ships in their drives, converting fusion reactors into expanding fireballs. The second salvo targeted command and control vessels, methodically eliminating fleet coordination. By the third salvo, Tokresh's perfect formation had dissolved into chaos as captains scattered, trying to evade weapons they couldn't see coming. "All human vessels," Morrison transmitted, "execute Hammer Protocol." From hiding positions throughout the inner solar system, 432 human warships dropped their stealth and opened fire simultaneously. Railgun rounds punched through Krellik's armor. Missile swarms overwhelmed point defense systems. Laser arrays carved through holes with surgical precision. Every weapon had been designed specifically to counter what humanity had observed during 40 years of patient study. Every tactic optimized to exploit Merchant League doctrine. The Krelliks had overwhelming numbers. Humanity had prepared for exactly this opponent, exactly this battle, exactly this moment. Aboard his flagship Iron Consequence, Marshal Tokresh watched his fleet die with growing incomprehension. The tactical display showed red icons multiplying faster than his mind could process. Ship after ship reported critical damage, catastrophic failures, or simply went silent. His communications network was in chaos, with captains screaming for orders while simultaneously being jammed by human cyber attacks. The perfect siege formation he'd employed successfully 17 times before had become a killing field where massed targets met precisely targeted firepower. "Return fire," he ordered. "All ships, engage human vessels with maximum prejudice." But his fleet was fighting blind. The Krelliks had never developed doctrine for an enemy that could appear anywhere, strike with overwhelming precision, then vanish before retaliation arrived. Their sensors were designed to track merchant vessels and planetary defenses, not military craft that could bend electromagnetic radiation around their hulls. Their weapon systems assumed targets would fight directly, not fade in and out of detection like ghosts. Humanity fought like no species the Merchant League had ever faced, because humanity had spent centuries perfecting warfare against themselves, the most adaptable, creative, and vicious opponents in the known galaxy. Every tactic they employed came from thousands of years of human conflict, refined through countless wars, now scaled up and applied with precision against an enemy who'd never faced an opponent that matched their weight class. "Sir," Tokaresh's tactical officer reported, voice shaking, "we've lost 346 ships in the first 20 minutes. Human casualties are minimal. Their hit-and-run tactics make sustained target lock nearly impossible." "Then we break through to Earth itself," Tokaresh snarled. "Maximum acceleration all ships. We'll bombard their homeworld and force them to defend a static position." It was exactly what humanity had predicted. As the surviving Krelliks fleet, now reduced to barely 800 ships through attrition, accelerated toward Earth, they entered the prepared kill box that 40 years of patient construction had created. Mass driver platforms fired from every angle. Railgun satellites activated throughout near-Earth space. Weapon platforms disguised as civilian infrastructure came online simultaneously. And lurking in carefully calculated positions, human warships waited to catch the Krelliks fleet in a crossfire that had been mathematically optimized months in advance. The Battle of Earth lasted 4 hours. When it ended, the Krelliks had lost over 1,000 ships. Humanity had lost 43. Marshal Tokaresh's flagship, crippled by sustained railgun fire, drifted helplessly near Luna's L2 point. Its shields were gone, its weapons offline, its drives reduced to slag. Across the tactical display, the Marshal could see the surviving Krelliks vessels, barely 400 left, attempting to flee to the outer system, harried constantly by human ships that appeared, struck, and vanished before Krelliks weapons could lock on. His communications officer managed to restore partial functionality to the main screen just as Admiral Catherine Morrison's face appeared, her expression professionally neutral, but her eyes carrying the weight of complete victory. "Marshal Tokaresh," she said formally, "your fleet is defeated. You have 400 ships remaining, all damaged, all being tracked by our forces. You cannot reach the outer system. You cannot effectively navigate with your systems compromised. You cannot fight blind against an enemy you cannot see. Surrender now, and I guarantee humane treatment for your crews under the Luna Accords. Continue fighting, and we will methodically destroy every remaining vessel." Tokaresh stared at her, his mandibles trembling with emotions he couldn't name. Rage, certainly. Humiliation, definitely. But underneath those familiar feelings lay something worse, the terrible understanding that everything he'd believed about military power was wrong. As the Merchant League had conquered through superior resources and overwhelming force because they'd only faced species with similar doctrines. They'd never encountered an opponent who'd spent 40 years studying them, learning their weaknesses, preparing specifically to defeat their exact approach to warfare. "How?" he whispered, the question torn from somewhere deep in his psyche. We had numbers, resources, experience, 3 centuries of military dominance. How could you possibly? Because you never faced an opponent like humanity, Morrison said simply. Every species you conquered fought your way. Direct confrontation, resource competition, force against force. We didn't. We studied you. We learned how you think, how you fight, what assumptions you make. Then we prepared methodically to exploit every single weakness in your doctrine. You brought overwhelming force. We brought patience, precision, and preparation. That's not warfare, Tokresh said bitterly. That's how humanity has waged war against itself for 10,000 years, Morrison finished. Every tactic we used, every strategy, every deception, we perfected it fighting each other on Earth. You never stood a chance, Marshal, because you were facing an enemy that's been preparing for this fight since before your species achieved space travel. We just didn't know who the enemy would be until you arrived. Tokresh looked at his tactical display one final time, seeing the red icons of his shattered fleet scattered across the inner solar system, seeing the blue icons of human vessels positioned with mathematical precision to intercept any escape attempt. 400 ships survived out of 1,500. 30,000 crew dead. The Merchant League's primary battle fleet destroyed in a single engagement. I surrender, he said quietly, each word feeling like shattered glass in his throat. On behalf of all remaining Krellix forces in the system, I surrender unconditionally. Acknowledged, Morrison replied. Human boarding parties will secure your remaining vessels. Medical teams will treat your wounded. All prisoners will be held according to the Luna Accords. No torture, no summary executions, no collective punishment. You will be transported to Earth for formal surrender and peace negotiations. The screen went dark. Tokresh sat alone in his command chair, listening to the sounds of his flagship dying around him, feeling the weight of absolute defeat pressing down on his shoulders. Somewhere in the back of his mind, he remembered High Commander Nikolai's warnings, Ambassador Reeves's promise that humanity's patience wasn't weakness, every indicator that this species was different from what the Merchant League had expected. He dismissed it all. They all had. And now the price for that dismissal was painted across the solar system in the wreckage of 1,500 warships. 20 minutes later, human Marines breached Iron Consequence's command deck. They moved with professional efficiency, weapons ready, but not firing unnecessarily, securing the space with practiced precision that spoke to thousands of years of military doctrine. Their armor was scarred from combat. Their weapons still warm from recent use, but their movements remained controlled and disciplined. Commander Sarah Torres removed her helmet, revealing a face that carried the exhaustion of sustained combat, but also unwavering determination. She approached Tokresh's command chair, her rifle lowered but ready, her expression neutral. Marshal Tokresh, she said formally, I am Commander Torres, 3rd Human Expeditionary Force. You are now a prisoner of war. Do you understand? Tokresh looked at her, this human warrior who'd helped destroy his fleet, and nodded slowly. I understand. Kill me and be done with it. I failed the Merchant League. I led my forces into annihilation. There is no honor in survival. Torres's expression softened slightly. We don't execute prisoners, Marshal. That's part of what makes us different from you. She gestured to her Marines. Secure him for transport. Medical team, we have wounded Krellix crew throughout the ship. Treat them as you would our own. You. Tokresh's mandibles clicked with confusion. You're treating our wounded after we came to subjugate your world? The Luna Accords require humane treatment of prisoners and wounded enemy combatants, Torres explained. It's one of our oldest agreements about warfare. Your soldiers following orders, not monsters. You deserve medical care, food, shelter, and eventual repatriation once peace terms are negotiated. She paused, studying his expression. You came here expecting to fight primitives who would either surrender or die resisting. Instead, you found a species that spent 10,000 years learning how to wage war against the most dangerous opponent in the galaxy, ourselves. We learned mercy the hard way, Marshal, through centuries of atrocities that taught us what not to become. You thought patience was weakness. We knew patience combined with preparation was the only way to ensure we never became victims again. Takresh felt something break inside him, some fundamental assumption about power and conquest and military dominance. The Merchant League had ruled through strength and exploitation, treating conquered species as resources to be extracted. Humanity had defeated them completely, but was now offering medical care, prisoner rights, and eventual release. It was incomprehensible. What do you want from us? He asked quietly. First, we want your complete surrender and the withdrawal of all Merchant League forces from human territory, Torres said. Second, we want formal negotiations for a treaty that ensures this never happens again. Third, we want the Merchant League to dismantle its exploitation protocols and establish equitable trade relationships with every species you currently subjugate. She met his eyes directly. We don't want to rule you, Marshal. We don't want revenge or tribute or submission. We want the galaxy to understand that humanity will defend itself and others from exploitation. We want a future where species negotiate as equals, not predators and prey. And we're strong enough now to enforce that future. As Torres's Marines escorted him off the bridge, Takresh looked back at the tactical display one final time. 400 Krellix ships surrendering to 432 human vessels. The Merchant League's 3-century reign ending not through superior force, but through comprehensive defeat by an opponent who'd prepared methodically for exactly this confrontation. Humanity hadn't won through overwhelming power. They'd won through decades of careful preparation and the wisdom to strike only when victory was certain. 2 weeks later, on Earth, representatives from 17 species gathered in Geneva for the formal peace conference. The Krellix Merchant League arrived broken and humiliated, their council forced to acknowledge what their military had learned through bitter experience. Humanity was not a primitive species to be exploited. They were a mature civilization that had simply been patient while preparing for any threat the galaxy might present. High Commander Nikolai attended as a witness. He'd been arrested by Takresh's officers for insubordination shortly after the Third Fleet arrived, punishment for retreating without council authorization. The humans had captured him, along with the other Krellix prisoners, when Iron Consequence fell, and now he sat in the gallery, a free observer, rather than a prisoner of his own people. He sat in the gallery, watching as Admiral Catherine Morrison presented humanity's terms: complete Merchant League withdrawal from human space, dissolution of all exploitation charters across League territory, establishment of an equitable trade federation where no species could be economically enslaved, and permanent human membership on the Galactic Council. The Merchant League had no choice but to accept. Their military was shattered, their economic leverage destroyed by human cyber warfare that had exposed every corrupt practice and predatory contract. Species they'd subjugated for decades were already declaring independence, protected by human fleets that had proven capable of defeating any force the League could muster. Senior Merchant Calthor signed the treaty with trembling mandibles, each stroke of his signature marking the end of 3 centuries of dominance. When it was done, he looked directly at Admiral Catherine Morrison. "You could have destroyed us completely," he said quietly. Your fleets could have bombarded our worlds, enslaved our people, extracted revenge for every species we exploited. Why didn't you? Morrison stood, her uniform bearing the insignia of humanity's first interstellar military command. Because we're not you, senior merchant. We learned through 10,000 years of warfare that the cycle of revenge and exploitation leads nowhere except mutual destruction. We fight to defend, not to conquer. We prepared for 40 years to ensure we could never be victims, not to become predators ourselves. She gestured to the treaty document. This is humanity's message to the galaxy. We will defend ourselves and any species facing exploitation. We will use force when necessary. But we will also show mercy, negotiate in good faith, and work toward a future where strength serves justice rather than profit. That's what patience bought us. Not just military victory, but moral certainty about who we choose to be. The conference ended with the establishment of the new Galactic Trade Federation, with humanity serving as mediators and enforcers to ensure no species could exploit another. The mass drivers and railgun platforms remained in place throughout human space, a permanent reminder of the price for underestimating humanity. Marshal Takresh, imprisoned humanely on Earth, watched the treaty signing on his cell's display screen. He was allowed visitors, provided medical care, given educational materials about human history and culture. His captors treated him with professional courtesy, never cruel but never allowing him to forget that his attempt at conquest had failed completely. Months later, when the first group of Krellix prisoners was repatriated, Takresh wrote a memoir that became mandatory reading at the Merchant League's Reformed Military Academy. Its title, "We Thought Patience Was Weakness." The final passage became famous across the galaxy. Humanity warned us. They told us explicitly that patience wasn't weakness, that 40 years of preparation meant something. We dismissed their warning because we couldn't imagine that a species recently emerged to space could threaten the Merchant League's military might. We were wrong. Humanity spent those 40 years studying us, learning our weaknesses, preparing methodically to defeat us using our own assumptions against us. They didn't win through superior numbers or overwhelming force. They won through patience, preparation, and the absolute certainty that when they finally acted, they couldn't lose. Let this be the lesson. Never mistake patience for weakness. Sometimes it's simply an opponent waiting until they're absolutely certain of victory. 5 years after the Battle of Earth, Ambassador Reeves stood on the observation deck of Luna Station, looking out at the solar system that had become humanity's fortress and home. The mass driver platforms were still operational, maintained carefully in case another threat emerged. The stealth fleets patrolled constantly, ensuring human space remained secure. The cyber warfare teams continued monitoring galactic networks, patient as always, watching for any sign that the cycle of exploitation might begin again. But now, human values shaped galactic policy. The Galactic Council included 7 species formerly subjugated by the Merchant League, all guaranteed protection by human military might. Trade occurred between equals, not predators and prey. Reeves smiled as she watched a Krellix merchant vessel dock peacefully at Luna Station, bringing trade goods under equitable contracts. The galaxy had learned its lesson. Sometimes the species you dismissed as primitive turned out to be the most dangerous opponent you'd ever face. Not because of what they showed you, but because of what they chose to hide until it mattered.